Hello and welcome to Playoffs, Week 1 of the Mount Silver Mystery Egg Division. My name is Scribbles. I am the coach of the Colorado Quarterfinals, and for our first matchup in Playoffs, we are up against AlphaMelon and the B-Town Bronzongs. So, because of the way the Mount Silver playoffs work, I actually ended up having a choice between 3 opponents this week. I had AlphaMelon, who I hadn't played in the regular season, and is who I ended up picking, and I'll explain why. I think it's kind of an interesting fold into the matchup this week. I had Ashy and the Syracuse Whimsicots. I did not end up picking them. They have a terribly threatening team. Very, very scary to play against. Pheromosa, Victini, Rayquaza, just a lot of power. And I have decent walls, but they're not infallible. And then the last matchup was actually the 8 seed, which was would have been the only rematch that I could have possibly gone. And I think rematches are generally just a little bit harder. And that was against the Dead Sea Silvally. And basically they had Zygarde complete, so I just didn't want to play them. Zygarde complete is really, really difficult for my team to deal with. I got through our matchup by basically positioning Megalodios and getting set up and not getting parried and sweeping. It was kind of a cheesy victory. I just don't want to play that. And so I was really happy to be 3 seed and to be able to avoid that matchup round 1. So on to why I picked AlphaMelon for this matchup and the B-Town Bronzongs. If you look across their team, there are a lot of threats similar to the Syracuse Whimsicots. The difference is that basically all of these threats tend to be more specially oriented. You've got Kieran White, who's an amazing special attacker. Decent physical attacker stats-wise. I don't even know really how good its move pool is on the physical side. You have Darkrai, who's a special attacker. You have Tornti, who would rather attack specially, I feel. Landorus, also probably rather attack specially, but does have a good physical move pool. Mega Manectric is special. Empoleon isn't really a great attacker aside from kind of niche like weakness policy, Swords Dance kind of sets. Ninetales, special. Medicham, physical. Medicham's the one that's for sure a physical attacker. Cresselia, it's just a wall. And then Smeargle, that's the whole team there. You'll notice there's a ton of special threats, and my team matches up with special attackers really well. You go through Ho-Oh, has amazing special defense. Magearna, amazing special defense. Megalodios, amazing special defense. Just kind of all down the lineup, I have ways to wall special attackers. So I thought that AlphaMelon was my best matchup for that reason, and basically that reason only. It was, they have special attackers, I have special walls, so it's going to be really hard for them to break me. Going into the team build, looking at the overall picture, I knew that it was going to be difficult to consistently wall their Pokemon, even though I do have kind of the Pokemon that are built really well for it, just because their sheer damage output is so high. So I wanted to make sure that I had good amounts of speed control, and beyond that I had ways to prevent or at least mitigate the role of Aurora Veil against my team. So Aurora Veil makes the tremendous special attackers on AlphaMelon's team also have tremendous bulk from both physical and special, which is threatening, and it's kind of what carried AlphaMelon into the playoffs in a lot of cases. So that was kind of the overall team build. We'll get into individual mons and how they kind of fit into that. The first one here is Flame Orb, Guts, Conkeldurr. I thought this Pokemon was an obvious bring for me. Fighting Stab against their team. If you go down the list, super effective, not very effective, not very effective, neutral, super, neutral, not very effective, super. So half the team gets hit super effectively by fighting, and it's kind of, in a lot of ways, the better half of the team that needs to watch out for it. Specifically Kyurem and Darkrai, both their Ubers get hit super effective by fighting. So Mach Punch seemed really valuable to give me a tool to revenge. Facade is amazing neutral coverage. Empoleon resists, but Empoleon isn't going to take a Mach Punch very well after, if at all. And knockoff gave me a way to kind of remove items from Cresselia. Basically, Conkeldurr was going to be a little bit of a breaker. The max attack, adamant, brave, whatever, was pretty obvious to me. The defense and special defense investment, these were a little bit more of an adventure finding. I didn't want to invest in HP. Drain Punch, if I could ever get it in position to launch off a Drain Punch, I guess in against Empoleon, it can Drain Punch. It's basically the only scenario. There's another one we'll get to here in a second where I can Drain Punch, and that's based on my investment here. This set, this 20 defense, well, 20 defense doesn't matter, but the 236 special defense, this lives a Life Orb Earth Power from Landorus, which will be the most powerful special attack that Landorus can fire off. It lives a timid Life Orb Ice Beam from Kyurem White. This is not the most powerful attack Kyurem White could throw off, but probably the most likely. It also lives a Life Orb Psychic from Darkrai, including 1 turn of burn. This is important because this allows me to kill Darkrai with Drain Punch. If we get in a position where it's kind of a 1v1, Darkrai switches in on me or something like that, we both double pivot into our respective Pokemon. Drain Punch will give me 50% of my health back, and I basically trade half a Conk for a whole Darkrai, which seems great to me. The rest of it doesn't seem too impactful. Mega Manectric was kind of a problem for me, but Facade into Mach will kill after Intimidate, so that's nice to know. Moving on to the next set. This was my dedicated sweeper. Shift Gear, Magearna is amazing. This particular set here, 244 Timid at +2 outspeeds all Scarfers on the opponent's team aside from Darkrai, I believe. Ninetales, I suppose Scarf Ninetales outspeeds. This outspeeds up to Scarf 101. And this particular set is a mild lure set. So as far as switch-ins to Magearna or walls to Magearna go, if I get in position ready to set up, there's 2 Pokemon that can potentially do it. One is Empoleon. So Empoleon, if I'm not running electric coverage, and even if I am, if it's like Assault Vested or something like that, can switch in and get a lot of damage off. The other one is Cress. So Cress, hard walls, damn near every Magearna set. You can design something really niche with Substitute, Pain Split, Calm Mind, like some sort of nonsense like that maybe beats a Cress, but it's ugly and it's only going to be useful for one Pokemon. You're basically going to be revenged by everything afterward. So I need to kill Cress in order to open up Magearna. As long as Cress is alive, this Magearna can't do anything. The one exception is if I tech on Volt Switch. When I move Magearna in, it's going to bring out Cress. I can Volt Switch out into either Conkeldurr, who can fire off a knockoff, remove its leftovers, prevent that type of recovery, or we'll get to one of my sets later that will also be really, really nicely positioned against Cress. The coverage here, Flash Cannon, Dazzling Gleam. Once we're set up, we don't want to be lowering our special attack any. We already have to run Timid to get the speed tier we want. So Fleur Cannon alongside setup really isn't a great option most of the time. Luckily for me, if you look at their team, you won't see a Fairy Resist outside of Empoleon. So Volt Switch also kind of covers the one Fairy Resist on my opponent's team. And then Flash Cannon does a lot of neutral damage just across the team. Gives me a way to potentially pick up KOs, gives me a way to potentially pick up special defense drops. Realistically, I probably didn't need dual stab here. Both hit the opponent really hard. I just didn't want to run Floor, basically. And Dazzling Gleam, Flash Cannon both seemed pretty good. Next set is Crobat here. This is a pretty standard Crobat with one exception. Brave Bird Steel Wing, U-turn Defog. Infiltrator is a cool ability, and you think about it for things like sub. You don't think about it for things like screens. It ignores screens in addition to substitutes, so I can attack as if Aurora Veil wasn't there. So my Brave Birds will still be doing full damage, Steel Wing will still be doing full damage. U-turn will still be doing full damage. Defog can remove those screens for the rest of the team. The speed here, 385 is... Who's that? Mega Manectric for sure. So that outspeeds Mega Manectric. Modest? Because it's 135, so it's not that, it's Darkrai. So this outspeeds Darkrai. The attack investment ensures that Steel Wing with Expert Belt KOs max HP Ninetales. So it'll pick up that KO. The 4 times the effectivity is what drew me to Steel Wing. This is a potential lead against Ninetales because it can pick up the OHKO. Brave Bird is just for good, consistent damage. It's not really picking up KOs, just for damage. So a pretty simple set there. This set went through a lot of iterations. Uxie, well, Uxie's purpose is to get up Stealth Rocks. The AlphaMelon's team is somewhat weak to Stealth Rocks, and the removal is either in the form of Landorus, and if Landorus is running Defog, it's not running a coverage move, and it needs a lot of coverage to hit my whole team. Empoleon, who is potential setup fodder for several of my Pokemon, or Smeargle, and a Smeargle running Defog is, you know, similar to Landorus, but in a different way. If you're gonna run a particular niche set, you kind of need the full move pool to get that accomplished in a lot of cases. So getting up Stealth Rock seemed really important. It also hits his team pretty hard. Kyurem, Ninetales both take good damage. Torn takes good damage. Everything else aside from Empoleon, I guess, takes neutral, so a lot of damage to be spread around there. Toxic's good for Cress, specifically. One of my best ways to deal with Cress is just get it Toxic. U-turn for positioning, and then Memento was the last move added. I did kind of look at the team, and offensively, it can kind of offensively prevent setup from Magearna, so Memento gave me an out to get Magearna in position to actually sweep. I considered other moves here. I had Imprison for a while. Imprison was neat because it basically shut down Empoleon. So Imprison, Toxic, U-turn, Stealth Rock. Empoleon's got Scald, maybe Earthquake left, depending on what its coverage is. Maybe both, but it would prevent rocks from my opponent. It also would prevent rocks from an opposing Smeargle. It would also prevent U-turn from Landorus if Landorus switched in. So it gave me a lot of utility. I also considered Safeguard. Safeguard would prevent something like a max speed Spore Smeargle, which I was terrified of, to be honest. I didn't have a lot of ways to prevent sleep. I considered Lumberry very briefly. The speed on Uxie here is for Smeargle. So this was probably going to be my lead, even over Crobat, just because I wanted to prevent shenanigans from Crobat as much as I possibly could. This would at least let me get rocks up and break sashes on Smeargle. Realistically, lead Smeargle, I was gonna have to let something go to sleep. The only exception to that would be if if it wasn't Sash and I led Conk, but I basically needed to have something go to sleep unless I ran Safeguard, and I just didn't like Safeguard because it felt really situational. And you can see again on the team that I thought they would bring up there. Smeargle and Empoleon are both potentials. I think those 8 were really the only potentials in my mind. But I assumed Smeargle wouldn't come because it weakened the team overall too much otherwise. So next set, this is kind of a physical win con. It's a bulk up, HP Ice, Close Combat, Plasma Fists. You know, a pretty basic Zero Aura. One interesting thing with this particular set is that the 8 special attack guarantees that Close Combat and HP Ice will kill Lando Eye after rocks. So if I have rocks up and I just fire off Close Combats kind of freely, fighting resists on his team are pretty limited. You've got Cress and you've got Lando and Torn. So fire off Close Combat pretty freely, and then an HP Ice would pick up that KO. The 56 special defense is just kind of a dump stat. Speed allows me to outspeed Mega Manectric, and Fight Z is good for bulk up, which gives you +2 attack, +1 defense. It's also good for Close Combat, so it gives me a couple options. I wasn't too keen on this set. I wasn't exactly sure the direction I wanted to go. I know I wanted something on the physical side to set up, but it kind of felt bad against Mega Manectric overall, because I just was, I always had to fear Intimidate, and I always had to fear, the Lightning Rod pre-Mega Evolution. So both are pretty troublesome. The last set was the hardest set, and this set went through a ton of iterations. I was really sure about the first 5 Pokemon. The 6th Pokemon, I didn't know what I was doing. We had a Snarl, Calm Mind, Rest, Sleep Talk, Suicune to 1v1 Cress. As long as they didn't switch out, who does that? There's the standard Crocoon. A lot of kind of Calm Mind Suicunes went through my head because it does have good matchup, but it's not great. Partially because it can lose a 1v1 to Cress a lot of times if they're running Psyshock. Manectric is always going to do a lot of damage to it. Empoleon is going to frustrate that set quite a bit. It seemed difficult to get set up because its speed tier was really bad, and it just never doesn't really exert very much pressure. So I ultimately decided on going with Ho-Oh. Now once I got to Ho-Oh, I still couldn't decide on a set. I went back and forth with a few different people about possible sets. I was talking to, I believe it was Ian, about a really weird Moronga Berry set. So Moronga Berry, you get hit by a special attack, it boosts your special defense. Paradoxically enough. If I got to +1 special defense, I could just basically wall everything, but with Toxic, Roost, Protect. So it was basically going to be kind of a Suicune. I kind of called it Flappy Coon in my head for a bit. I ultimately decided on a weakness policy set. So this particular set has a very interesting EV spread. The special defense and HP guaranteed that it survived. I'll have to actually hold on one second. I'm gonna check what this was, because this was pretty important, and I like this set a lot, even though it was kind of bad. So here, let me read the details here. So the HP investment minimizes Stealth Rock damage. Okay, so it's an odd number divisible by 16 minus 1. So it's the most HP to cause the minimum amount of hail damage. It also, since it's an odd number, is going to cause the least amount of Stealth Rock damage. And aside from that, it's the most HP possible otherwise, I think. So if I went up to the next one, I don't think I could go up to the next one. I don't know if that seems right. Something like that. My special attack investment at +2 O-code uninvested Lando-I, Manectric, and Darkrai, and also 3-hit KO'd max HP, max special defense Cress. 3-hit KO is important because it forces my opponent to basically not be able to switch in. So I guess if it spams Moonlight, it would be okay. The problem with that is that I'm running pressure, so it only recovers 4 times, and it won't be able to beat me otherwise. Flame Charge gets me to +1 speed. At +1 speed, I outspeed max speed Manectric. Kind of a bunch of crazy stuff there. The HP, so the HP and special defense investment, there's a reason it's not just special defense. The HP, in addition to minimizing hail and Stealth Rock damage, I did the calc on max attack Adamant Rock Slide from Life Orb, Sheer Force, Landorus, and it does 99.7% after a Roost. So if I'm at +1 speed and that switches in, I can Roost, survive the hit, get my weakness policy boost, kill it with Flamethrower essentially. And then from there I outspeed the rest of the team, so I can kind of just Roost stall back up to fully healthy. The substitute here allows me to basically avoid a Thunder Wave on switch in, things like that. Avoid the Thunder Wave from Cress as well. Yeah, so a bunch of weird shit happening with this set. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I spent a lot of time on it. I don't know if it's actually any good, but let's get to the battle and see how it does. Okay, so now we're into the battle, and looking at their team, they did not bring Cresselia, which is a great relief to me. It was very, very difficult for my team to break. They did bring Smeargle, which is the opposite of a relief to me. I suppose if I had to choose one, I would rather see Smeargle over Cress, but Smeargle has Spore, and I don't have any way to deal with Sleep, at least initially. Once the Conkeldurr gets its Flame Orb activated, it's a switch in to Sleep. But there's a lot of other annoying things that Smeargle can do. I mean, like a King Shield on my Mach Punch would be super, super obnoxious. So that's kind of unfortunate. The rest of the team is basically what I expected. As far as leads are concerned, I know my Uxie outspeeds Smeargle. I know it's not going to die to anything from basically anything on my opponent's team. So I'm going to go ahead and lead Uxie and just try and get my rocks up, and then we'll go from there. The good thing about getting rocks up is it means that Smeargle's Sash is broken if it tries to switch back in. My opponent's defogging options are either Smeargle or Lando I. And Lando I has a hard time running defog because it really wants to have, you know, coverage for my whole team. It wants ground coverage, it wants psychic coverage, it wants rock coverage, it potentially wants ice coverage for Megalotti, maybe Dark Pulse. I don't remember all of its coverage, but if it has to forego a move slot for defog, it's not as effective at kind of doing damage to my whole team. And if Smeargle has defog, I can start to burn sleep turns when it tries to defog away my rocks. So Uxie seemed like the lead. A little sad to miss out on potential Crobat against Alolan Ninetales interactions, but we'll see if that comes up later in the battle. So I lead Uxie, opponent leads Ninetales. This is fairly expected. I'm just going to fire off my rocks, and they just throw off the Aurora Veil. So in this position, I don't want a threat to come in and just start doing damage to my team, so I'm perfectly comfortable throwing off a Toxic. Alolan Ninetales isn't going to do a lot of damage to me. Toxic seemed like the best play to kind of prevent the opposing team from kind of going in with the maximum benefit of Aurora Veil. So I throw off the Toxic. I luckily do connect as the opponent goes for Blizzard. So Blizzard does 22%, which isn't that much. You know, you factor in the hail damage, and it's a 4-hit KO. I guess it might even be a roll to 4-hit KO after hail damage. It's heavily in my opponent's favor. But I'm not really threatened here, and I've got a berry, so I know it's actually not a 4-hit KO. This 1v1 is really, really close, and I'm going to be able to stall out Aurora Veil turn, so the positioning here for me is identical to the previous turn. I don't want a threat to come in. I'm just going to click Toxic again. My opponent clicks Blizzard. I click Toxic, so, you know, a little bit of egg on my face. I take a little bit of damage. Another turn of Aurora Veil is gone, which is huge. A turn of Aurora Veil for, you know, 20-some-odd% on Uxie seems like a fair trade, especially when I've got something to restore health right in the back. So at this point, I'm still comfortable firing off Toxics. I kind of want to get my berry activated, at least to be up at a higher level of health so that I can switch in and be, you know, a partial check to some of my opponent's attacking Pokemon. So I'm going to fire off a third Toxic, triple Toxic, basically just because I want my berry to activate, and I don't want to switch something in on a Blizzard and risk a potential freeze, because it would be very obnoxious for my whole team to be frozen. Fortunately for me, to some degree, my opponent switches out into Manectric, and Manectric, the Toxic hits, which is also fortunate for me, and I'm down to 31%. So this position isn't the best for me. There's a lot of attacks Manectric can go for that kill me. Thunderbolt kills me, Overheat kills me, Signal Beam kills me, and none of those are perfectly ideal for me. The one thing that doesn't kill me is Volt Switch. It will actually activate my berry, and I really don't want to lose positioning here. So for one, I don't think Zera is a play here. The odds of Overheat coming out are pretty high, and Overheat will do a ton of damage to Zera, and I don't really want to throw away one of my potential win cons late game into an attack like that. So I'm going to go ahead and sack Uxie here to one of the more powerful attacks, or activate my berry on a Volt Switch and get a slow U-turn off. So my play here is U-turn. My opponent Mega Evolves and goes for Toxic, which is actually pretty good for me. So with the Toxic, I'll be able to... I'll stop here for a second. With the Toxic, I'll be able to kind of pivot in at a later time and activate my berry kind of on my terms to some degree. This interaction is pretty interesting. So when I U-turn out, I wasn't expecting to be U-turning out against Manectric that was still in. I either expected to die or Manectric to Volt Switch. So what I switched in here was actually pretty crucial. And I thought about this for a little bit, and I think this is something that I've started to realize is more and more important in games, and I think I've started to get a lot better at it as I've been playing. What I wanted to do here is I wanted to go into a Pokemon that would put my opponent in an awkward position. Kind of thinking a couple turns ahead. I'd like to get Uxie back in, and I would like to get my berry activated, right? So at 31%, there's only a couple ways I can do this. I need my opponent to Volt Switch on me, I need him to Toxic, or I need him to switch out. Any of those options, I can switch Uxie in and activate my berry. If I go Magearna, it's going to bait an Overheat or Volt Switch. Probably an Overheat just to get damage off. Overheat kills a lot of Magearna sets. I mean, if I'm Akaberry, I'm not nearly as much of a threat to my opponent as if I'm a different set. So Magearna's not the play. Conk doesn't kill with Aurora Veil up, and I'm still not sure if it was Light Clay. Alolan Ninetales, watching the matches that AlphaMelon played, Light Clay was a very popular item. So I was working off the assumption that there were still 3 more turns of Aurora Veil left, so Conk's not going to be able to do enough damage to Manectric and has pretty bad special defense, and I'd kind of like to preserve its bulk. Crobat is just going to bait out a Volt Switch, so I could do some, you know, funky interactions with like a Crobat into a Zera, but that still puts me at risk of kind of the overheat on the predicted Zera. Ho-Oh would have been interesting. It's not a great time to set up Ho-Oh. I haven't confirmed an item on any of my opposing Pokemon, the opponent's Pokemon, so any of their choice Scarfers will still be faster than Flame Charge Ho-Oh. I might potentially be able to get my weakness policy activated. I might just get Toxic as well, which would put me in a really awkward, dumb spot. So that doesn't seem like a good switch in, so I actually ended up going into Zeraora here. Zeraora on the field prevents the use of electric attacks, which seems somewhat counterproductive because I wanted to get Uxie back in on a Volt Switch. It does force my opponent to click one of 2 moves, presumably an Overheat or Toxic again. Overheat will kill Uxie if I pivot back in, but it'll leave Manectric at -2, which gives me room to set up Magearna, which is pretty nice, especially if they're not Light Clay Ninetales. So if Aurora Veil ends and I can set up Ninetale or set up Magearna on a -2 Manectric, my opponent's in a really, really bad spot. The other possibility is that they click Toxic again, in which case Uxie comes back in and is perfectly healthy. And even if they do make some prediction on like a Signal Beam or they go Thunderbolt on Zeraora, it's okay if I have to sack Uxie. Uxie's done a ton of work already this game. So I pivot out to Zera and I bring Uxie right back in. Hail ends, Aurora Veil doesn't, so they are Light Clay on their Alolan Ninetales. Toxic hits me, activates my berry, I'm back up to 75. My opponent no longer can kill me with any attack. I'm presuming either a hard switch out or a Volt Switch. In this case, I see 2 turns left of Aurora Veil, so I really want to be able to pivot in a Pokemon as Aurora Veil ends. I was thinking Crobat at the time to prevent Ninetales from getting Aurora Veil up again. So at this stage, I have slow U-turn. I can see what Manectric goes for, who they switch out into. So I'm just going to fire off a slow U-turn again to get myself in position. When they go out to Landorus, this is actually an interesting interaction. Landorus, I was worried about Choice Scarf. So it outspeeds Zeraora. I can't set Zeraora up until I can confirm that it's not Choice Scarf. So I need to figure out its set, basically. The best way I have to figure out its set now, I could go to Zeraora and figure out its set, but, I don't want to die to a Choice Scarf Earth Power. So I'm going to go out to Crobat. So the reason I'm going to go out to Crobat is Crobat outspeeds Landorus naturally. So the only way Landorus will be faster is if it's Choice Scarf, so I can confirm its item. Landorus won't be able to lock into a ground move against Crobat if it is Choice Scarfed. So my opponent has to deal with that reality. It would be a pretty wild play to click Choice Scarf ground move against Crobat. Even if I U-turn, I know you're faster and I know you just clicked a ground move, so I'll just go right back out to Crobat. It's not a play. So the Crobat play here is basically just to check if they're Choice Scarfed. That's all I wanted to figure out here. I'm going to click U-turn in case they switch out into a different Pokemon. I still get the initiative. If they are not Choice Scarfed, I can pretty safely switch in either Conk or just sack Uxie. Again, Uxie's done a lot of work. I'm not too worried about it dying here. So I feel comfortable going for U-turn and confirming whether or not this is Scarf. My opponent ends up going for Stone Edge and missing. The only way it's faster than me is if it's Scarf, and it clicks Stone Edge, and it missed. So the miss is unfortunate. It prevented a kill. It would have killed Crobat, obviously. But it's still not a good position for my opponent. I know you're locked into Stone Edge. This is the last turn of Aurora Veil. I didn't necessarily go into Crobat trying to bait out a rock move. But my opponent locking into a rock move to try and kill Crobat put them in a horrible position. I go to U-turn and I bring in Magearna, and the game's over here. There's no set my opponent can have that wins the game from here. Maybe there's like a Roselli Berry Darkrai set that could potentially win. A Roselli Berry or Babiri Berry Kyurem White. You'd have to be in a different headspace to want to run a damage reducing berry on those two offensive like juggernaut Pokemon when you're relying on Aurora Veil as a technique. So Stone Edge here on a crit does 30% from max attack Adamant, Life Orb Landorus, Life Orb Sheer Force Landorus. So I can shift gear, and once I shift gear, +2, I outspeed the whole team. Darkrai would have to be Scarfed. That's the Darkrai or Alolan Ninetales would have to be Scarfed, and we already know Alolan Ninetales is Light Clay. So Scarfed Darkrai is the only thing that could potentially outspeed me here, which I guess that's a set. Flamethrower is not going to do a ton to me, but I guess it's a set. So I shift gear here. My opponent brings in Ninetales. I think this is the right play, bringing in Ninetales. If I am Trick Room, or if I am Substitute, I guess more specifically if I am Substitute, if I Calm Mind, you can get up an Aurora Veil, and with an Aurora Veil, maybe you can start to do something. I guess if I Calm Mind or Substitute here, that would be a throw. Shift Gear was always my play, and after Shift Gearing, Ninetales dies to anything. Flash Cannon does a ton. I'm +1 now. It's over. With the rocks up, every sash is broken on the opposing team. It's just over. I outspeed the whole team. I outspeed the whole team Scarfed. Aside from Darkrai. and I'm just going to sweep from here, and that's going to be the end of the game. So I think just it was a game of positioning. The Scarf Landorus, I think, it was a good bring, but I think not being hyper vigilant about your positioning against a devastatingly effective setup Mon basically gave me the position to win, and then I was keeping my mind towards that enough that I was able to execute on that game plan and pull through. So good game to AlphaMelon. Enjoyed watching you play this season. I liked your team. I liked a lot of the sets you brought with Smeargle. I thought it was a fun game. Yeah, and on to semis now, I guess. My goal coming into this was to make the playoffs. After 3 weeks, I was 1-2, so it didn't seem super likely. And now into the semifinals, playing Dark Soul Project, which is a rematch, which should be a lot of fun. Came down to a really weird end game last time. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Ian and Regenix, who gave me a couple of pointers on the team build this week. And yeah, I guess see you guys next week.